Will Devin Dampier be the next Group of 5 QB to become a star at the P4 level or the latest bust? We're talking about it on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen and view of the day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. If it's your first time listening to the show, make sure you like and subscribe. Love interacting with everyone in the YouTube comments. My name is JT Wistrcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. Excited to be joined by the host of Locked On Baylor, Cam Stuart. And Cam, was really excited to have you on for this one because Utah got a new quarterback. We're really excited. Devin Dampier. He is going to be a heck of a player, I think. But the question is, he's making the jump from the Group of 5 to the P4. You had a quarterback last year in Daquan Finn, star at Toledo, goes to Baylor. And for those of you Utah fans, I'd be thinking, who's Daquan Finn? That's the quarterback that Utah beat, but that Utah beat Baylor with. And then you guys went on a hot streak and a run after that when you went back to Sawyer Robertson. So I want to know why did Daquan Finn not work out?
Yeah, so I mean, anyone that's making that jump, it's a risk, right? Like and that's any position, but specifically quarterback. Obviously, we know the importance of that position, especially in today's college football. And yes, you saw in September what it looks like when it's bottoming out with Daquan Finn playing at Utah. So the Dampier thing, it does intrigue me because the way he plays and coming in with the OC. Yep. You know, he's not shying away from like, I'm a dual threat quarterback at best. He's really a running quarterback. You know, he's just, and you look at the numbers here, like Daquan Finn was a better passer than Dampier was in the stop before making the jump to the Power 4.
True.
And like Finn, I was all on board with. He was a MAC Player of the Year. He was a Group of 5 All-American, which is a good unofficial award. And it looked like a guy who, you know, had done his 4 years. He was ready to kind of make that next step, playing for a really good offensive coordinator. Now, he did battle a bit of an injury, but you saw it in that Utah game. That's what it looks like when it's really bad. And then there are some that are in between, like Diego Pavia, you know, going from New Mexico State to Vanderbilt. I think he's a little overrated, but he was a good player. For Vandy this year. Taylon Green is someone who was somewhere in the middle, going from Boise State to Arkansas, a guy I wanted Baylor to go after. So all I'm saying is it's a risk. Mm-hmm. And I was really into Daquan Finn. I thought, you know, while he didn't run as much as Dampier did, like you saw the athleticism on tape, the same way you do with Dampier, like it pops and you're like, my God, this kid can do anything. It's just a bigger jump than I think even some of the real in-tune college football analysts think. But coming in with a coach is, I'd have to say, a difference.
It is a difference.
And all the ones I listed, right? Yeah.
It helps.
So,
but there are some similarities. I mean, when you look at Dampier stepping up to Daquan Finn. You mentioned Daquan Finn was a better passer. He threw for more yards, 2,657 that last year at Toledo, 22 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. And even he had over 500 yards rushing every year at Toledo, except for one, or over 500 yards all 3 years rushing at Toledo, which is really good for a rushing quarterback. I think the thing that gets me excited about Dampier, and we'll talk about the interception thing in a moment, is just how elusive he is. I mean, 1,000 yards rushing. No player in the country rushed for more yards per carry than Devin Dampier did, only sacked 4 times. So am I concerned about the interception thing when you get stingier secondaries, even a little bit better coaching in a lot of cases, right, with Big 12 coaches? So they might try to do things that trick them a little bit more. Yes, but Dampier does have better receiver play this coming year. And at the end of the day, Cam, the one thing that's really going to make him effective is he's going to be able to buy time. And it's just eventually you can only cover for so long. This guy, even though I don't expect him to only get sacked 4 times, I don't think he'll rush for 1,000 yards, but I expect him to be well over 500 with what a good athlete he is. And I do think that will help him navigate this transition.
That's the thing that makes coaches salivate. Is the same thing we saw with Daquan Finn of, man, he can extend plays that quarterback X would not be able to, and can give us something that quarterback X wouldn't give us.
Yep.
But then you have to think, how many plays does he take away? Like, let's use the Daquan Finn, Sawyer Robertson thing here. Like, yeah, Daquan Finn can get out of the pocket. Sawyer's a decent runner, but Daquan can really get out of the pocket, can avoid tackles, all that thing. And it's like, but how many of the passes we need him to make can he not make, and Sawyer Robertson can? And I think that's where this goes hand in hand with Dampier here, because I'm not going to lie to you, JT. A couple weeks ago, when the odds came out and I saw Utah at the top, and
we're going to talk about that in the second segment too. I saw that clip.
Couldn't believe that. I had some segments myself on it. And the first thing I looked at was, okay, I've heard the hype around this kid. I didn't know Devin Dampier, but I had heard the hype, and I looked at the numbers. I'm like, you've got to be kidding. A kid with 12 touchdowns and 12 picks coming from New Mexico is your savior for a 5-win at least improvement to win this conference? I still am a little perplexed by it, JT. I will say, look back to one of the bright spots of Utah's season, that Baylor game, and see where it could be pretty bad. And that's why I think Isaac Wilson is still in the chat. That's it.
He is still in the chat. I'll say this. I think Devin Dampier, I don't know what level he's going to be at next year. I think he's going to be pretty good. I feel pretty confident saying this transition will go better for him than it went for Daquan Finn. Would you agree with that?
I mean, yes, Daquan Finn played 2 games, and it was pretty bad in that second one specifically. And I think looking back on this, because Daquan was a good passer, but looking back on it, like you and we're not touting ourselves as big time football scouts or anything, but we do our research, we do our homework. And looking back, like a ton of his passing highlights, like he was just kind of throwing off the back foot and zipping it in there. And we should have read those signs as Baylor fans and been like, oh yeah, you can probably get away with that in the MAC. You can't in the Big 12. Like that whole thing gets overblown. Like, I think if you're a damn good player at a lower conference, there's no reason why you can't succeed. Let me look at Cam Scadaboo at a different position, right? There's no reason you can't be a top tier player in a Power 4 conference. But there are sometimes there's writing on the wall and saying, well, probably not getting away with that in the Big 12 against the Big 12 defenses. So yeah, I think Dampier will probably do better because he'll probably have more of a leash. And again, I've said it a couple times now, but coming in with a coach it's just different. So that should, kind of ease things, ease into this thing. And certainly, Utah also has a better supporting cast all across all 3 facets than what Daquan Finn went into last year. He did not have a top 20 nationally ranked defense with a lot of pieces coming back. And we didn't know what we had for weapons. And I think Utah's got a good idea, even though, bringing in a running back and a receiver or 2 in the portal too.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing too that excites me is he's going to have one of the best tackle duos in the country. So I don't really have to worry about, hey, blindside. Yes, is a guy going to break through once or twice? Sure. But like when they do break through, he's not going to only get sacked 4 times next year. We already said that, but he is not going to get sacked a ton because of how elusive he is too. And that ability to buy time, he won't be able to do what exactly he did, but there were some clips of him also just making Auburn and Arizona defenders look silly. So I do feel like he's ready to make this leap, but we
did that with Daquan. There's Notre Dame. There's Ohio State in that highlight tape. Yeah. I'm just saying, JT, buyer beware, okay?
Great. And that's exactly why I wanted to have you on, because I am looking at it with the rose-colored glasses. I do not want last season to get Cam, and I want to believe that we are going to see Dampier be that guy, but there are still those questions there. Speaking of last year, I was pretty high on Utah. Didn't work out so well. You are pretty high on Baylor and not high on Utah. I want to talk about some comments you made about the Utah Utes in the past and debate who will be better in 2025, Utah or Baylor, in one moment. But first, this episode of Locked On Utes and Locked On Baylor is brought to you by our great friends at TurboTax. That's right, it's tax season, the time of year that so often can be a hassle, but Intuit TurboTax has your back. Dealing with taxes can be so frustrating. The piles of paperwork and just the frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if we're going to get any money back. Now taxes is easily uploaded your forms with TurboTax Expert, who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. While they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed. All while you go about your day. No stress, no worrying, no waiting. Now, this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in the iOS mobile app, so guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Once again, that's TurboTax.com/guarantees. Let TurboTax help you make your taxes even easier today. Cam Stuart back here with me. And Cam, talking about the 2025 Big 12 football season. As Vegas does, they put out some early odds. Utah was tied with Kansas State to be the favorite. And we even saw ESPN's Bill Conley predict that Utah was going to win the conference. You were on with Drake Toll, and you had quite the reaction to that ranking. And I will say, I don't think Utah deserves to be the Big 12 favorite right now, based on what they did last year. Even though they brought in some good players on paper, I don't believe they deserve to be the favorite. But why were you so adamant that they do not?
Well, I mean, first off, into the context, and I'll fully admit this, I watched Utah play full games in September, right? I saw them play against Baylor, which looked pretty good. Saw them play against Oklahoma State, looked pretty good. And then they go 5-7.
The good days, September Utah football. This is good.
That's great, man. And then I see 5-7, and I don't care how many of them are one-score games. I know that gets brought up a lot, and I understand why. I understand fundamentally that argument. But then I'm like, why are we buying into this again? Like, Utah was also supposed to win the conference this year, and they went 5-7. So, like, where is this coming from? And this guy who is so valuable in Cam Rising that, you know, when he is there, it's a conference championship team, and when he's not, they're 5-7. He's also not going to be there. So that's why I'm like, I'm freaking out. Like, the fireworks are going on inside my head. And then I look into Utah a little bit more, and I do see how much the team is returning and how, you know, they don't get gashed in the portal. And obviously I did know that one thing of how good that defense was last year. And honestly, it came down to who we talked to in the first segment. I looked at Devin Dampier again and I said, that is the most important position. Mm-hmm. And that's a major question mark. And I thought back to, so I kind of waxed and waned on this. I was like, oh, maybe Utah is going to be pretty good. But then I said, well, no, I can't buy into this. I can't. And I think back to 2022, Baylor had a great defense the year before, and that was 21 was the great season. They won the Big 12. They won the Sugar Bowl, and they come back basically with a new quarterback. Blake Shapen had played a game and a half, 2.5 games, whatever it was, coming into the 2022 season. They were supposed to win the Big 12. They were picked number 10 in the country, and they went 6-7, JT. I've seen this happen. I've seen it with my own eyes. And so I just don't love where we're taking it. Like, again, what I kind of said in the first segment, if you're picking Utah to win the Big 12 and make the college football playoff, which is also what those odds were for. I mean, I think it was actually winning a national championship. They had the best.
That was actually. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah.
So then we're talking about, let's just talk about Big 12 championship. That is a 6-win improvement. Mm-hmm. That's a lot. No matter how many one-score games you win, that's a big jump. Like, we just came off a great year, a fun year for Baylor. That was a 5-win improvement, and it took almost a miracle. It was 6 straight wins to end the season. So that's where I'm still coming from this. I have a higher opinion of Utah than I did a few weeks ago. Well, the team anyway. But State is lovely. Like, I have a higher opinion of the team, but I just still, I'm like, I can't put them more than like 4th or 5th right now. Because when it does come down to quarterback, because I clearly am putting a big emphasis on that, I like Baylor's quarterback better. I like Arizona State's quarterback better. I like Kansas State's quarterback better. And I think some people were a little disappointed in his season last year. So I like Kansas's quarterback better. Yeah. I don't know what we're going to get from Dampier. So to me, it might be harsh honing in on just one position when there is a defense that good, but I still can't buy the Utah Big 12 champion stock. I can't do it, JT.
You make a number of great points.
Thank
If
you.
you'd said every single one of them about Arizona State, you would have been absolutely wrong last year. That's what
That's true. I mean,
that's what I'm looking at for this Utah team about why, hey, look, obviously I'm going to be looking at them in the most positive lens I can because I'm the Utah guy. Like that's what this is too. But there's a lot of reason to think this Utah team can be the team that bounces back. And I'm going to say this, Baylor deserves to be ranked higher right now. But Cam, I believe Utah will finish higher than Baylor next year. I think this Utah defense is I think this Utah defense is loaded up with talent again. I think the offensive line is good. And I really think Dampier is going to be a really good player for this Utah team. It's not Devin Dampier taking this team to 10 wins by himself. It's the fact you go from bad quarterback play to what I do believe will be good quarterback play next year. Now, a different type of good quarterback play, but I'm really high on this Utah team. I've talked about them a little bit. Let's talk about Baylor. I still have some questions, actually, and I
do too. To be fair, yeah,
that's true. Yeah, I and we talked about some of my questions with Utah too. So, but Baylor, my thing I'm still worried about with Baylor is, yes, you guys closed the year really well. You still didn't beat a ranked team last year. So that's a big concern as well. And look, I like Sawyer. I think he's a good player, but I look at some of the best defenses he played. BYU, Houston. That's 5 combined interceptions in those games. You can't turn it over if you're going to play the best team. And I also still have
BYU. He kept him in that game, though. He kept him in that game against BYU. They put him in a hole, and Houston was terrible. Yeah, it was his worst game of the season. Yeah.
Well, and Utah QBs look bad against Houston. Well, to be fair, Utah QBs look bad in a lot of games overall. But look, I'm looking at it from this standpoint too. You guys were also ready to run Dave Aranda out of town. I do have some questions about the culture and everything that's in place there. Can we really go from hot seat to all of a sudden Big 12 championship contender this year? There was some bad mojo around that Baylor football team at the start of the year. Do you really think that last year, I know you beat Kansas, but are they really going to be able to carry it all the way through? I have major questions about that. I've seen Utah still do that with the current culture they have in place.
Yeah, I would say, this is a different example, but there were some people throwing fire under the seat of Ryan Day a few months ago, and look where he is now. Look where he is now. No, but that's a tougher example because Ohio State's such a good program. But even like Marcus Freeman on the other side, like that was a guy who was not proven, had not proven anything until the back end of this season. And it turns out, maybe he can coach a little bit, got them right to the national championship game. And it's funny that it would then be 2 years removed. This year will then be 2 years removed from like the real, how did we hold on to Dave Aranda? Why didn't we fire him? And really 12 months after some people were still clamoring for it. And we still didn't know if he was going to be fired. Looking back on his best season at Baylor, 2021, one of 2 good seasons that he's had at Baylor, that was, a year removed from nobody even knew who this guy was. And you were coming off a 2-7 team. People after that season were like, you should have done everything to keep Matt Rule in here. Like, what a mistake. What a dropping of the ball that was. And then they went on to go and win the Big 12. This is a loaded question, or I guess I'm going to give a loaded answer, I think is a better way to put it, because I don't think the culture, the way we see it, was necessarily the problem at Baylor. It was just I didn't know if the guy knew how to win, which is also important.
He's won a Big 12 championship game.
I know. But then it becomes the point of like, is it just Matt Rule's guys? And it was all Matt Rule's guys. I thought Dave Aranda was the perfect guy to lead them. We went from a guy in Matt Rule who had never beaten a ranked team in 5 years to Dave doing it against 5 ranked teams in the same season and having the best finish in Baylor history. But it was just, it was like, do we have the right defensive coordinator, but he's actually a head coach? It was that kind of thing. He was still developing great relationships. He was recruiting well enough in terms of like getting in the final 3 of some really top guys, but they weren't winning football games. Those guys weren't committing there. So now once they start winning games, they pulled in a good class this year. It's like, maybe this is the right culture. So it's a long way of saying, JT, we're still trying to figure out if it's the right culture. Okay. Sure. Not all of us get coaches that for 20 years. Okay? We're still trying to figure out if this is the right deal. He's said the right things for the most part. His players say the right things. His assistants say and do the right things. And this year it turned into wins. And so now I look at a team that brings back most of their offensive line, brings back their quarterback, number one receiver, top two running backs, and basically their quarterback on defense at the Mike linebacker position. There are still question marks here for sure, but I look at those positions and say, to bring those back, there's a lot of teams with even a ton of talent out there that would kill to bring that kind of continuity back to their season this year.
I will say, I like this Baylor team. I think they're going to be good, and I do think they deserve to be ranked inside the top 5 of preseason polls for the conferences. But also say this, can Baylor be better than Utah if they can't actually beat them 0-2 last couple years, Cam?
Oh, you didn't have the Sawyer Robertson experience. I'm just throwing that out there.
Who was the quarterback 2 years ago, the game we played?
That was a different Sawyer Robertson. I did forget about that. That was Sawyer's first start ever. That was a way different Sawyer Robertson. Damn it. Yes, you did get the Sawyer Robertson experience, but we back up now. Okay.
Yes, and obviously quarterbacks make a huge from their first start all the way along to that. It is a long way, but I was thinking about it. I was like, I think he did come in that game.
Yeah, he did play that whole game actually. Yeah.
Hey, if there's one thing we can agree on, it's how insane Ohio State fans are. I understand they're frustrated about losing to Michigan, but like you have a coach who consistently gets you the college football playoff, and you're like, fire him. We're sitting here like, just get us once to the playoff, and we'll build a statue.
Please God, yes. We'll name the stadium after you, dude.
Exactly. And speaking of the playoff, that's a segue into this next one we're going to talk about. So Ross Dellinger had a report, Yahoo Sports. He does a great job of keeping up on the latest. The Big Ten and SEC are making moves again. They're trying to get 16-team playoff, and they want 4 auto bids. Cam, there's going to be a Big 12 squad show that'll air later in the week. We actually just recorded that a little bit ago. I said I think it's the worst thing to happen to college football if we allow 4 conference auto bids. I think it would be awful. I think the fact that a team like last year's Alabama team just gets to get in because they say they play in the SEC. When we saw Vandy, Oklahoma, when we saw Michigan beat them too, I think it would be a horrible look for the competitive spirit of college football and the fabric of the game that drew us all to it when we were young. That's what's in danger here by just saying you play in the SEC, you play in the Big Ten, even though you were the 4th best team in your own conference, you get to be in.
Yeah, it's honestly, it was, I don't want to sound like Nostradamus or anything, but when they first did the 12 team, I was like, obviously excited because that should prove beneficial for smaller teams, ones that don't get it should be for those. But I remember having that thought right away of like, is this going to afford more opportunities to the Liberties and the Boise States and the Coastal Carolinas of the world? Or is it just going to give more to Ole Miss or, Penn State, who ends up being in the top 5? They deserve to be in there. But that was like the team I was thinking of like these teams that can't quite get in from the Big Ten or the SEC, but we say, oh, well, they play in the Big Ten or the SEC. It goes against everything we believe in as Americans, JT, not just college football fans. Everything we believe in as Americans, man. This country was born out of fighting against, this just placement of putting someone in this position because of where they're from, because of, what family they're from or what patch they wear on their jersey. Like that's what we're fundamentally against. And this is America's game, college football. And yet we're going to bow down to that. We're going to say, oh, well, they're in the SEC. They're in the Big Ten. Where does that end? Who else would have been in there this year? Are you threatening to put Vandy in there from the SEC? Yeah, they beat some good teams. Like it's just, that's
Georgia College and State too. Or just Georgia College.
And that's where any expansion from here is not good for the rest of us. Okay. It's not like that. Like, all right, gun to your foot here. They put 14 teams in this year. Who was more likely to get in, Ole Miss or BYU?
BYU didn't have a chance.
No shot. They weren't even going to put Colorado in, even with the marketability of that. They weren't going to do it because they were Big 12. So that's where I'm like, any expansion from here is just bad. Like on paper, it should be good. And maybe 1 out of every 5 or 6 years, it is good. Yep. And you do get an extra team in there that deserves that shot, that didn't finish 4th in their conference. But we know how this works. We know how this sport works. It's not going to be that. And I do fear that from that Dellinger report too, is like anything from here is auto bids. And that's just not how this game should be played. I'm sorry. It's not how any game should be played.
It's not at all. It's insane. And the report says that the Big 12 could get 2 teams automatically in, but I look at it like, yay, so we get 2 teams in, and then as soon as we upset one SEC team, another one gets in that's undeserving. And look, maybe the Big 12 team's better, then they can beat them. But that's not even what this is about. It's about, like, do you deserve to be in there? Like, this is a bigger conversation than just what's best for the Big 12. It's about what's best for college football, sport in general. I like what you said. Even like it goes into politics.
Man.
It's crazy.
It's gonna take, even if there were auto bids for the Big 12, like, we'll be like, yay, that's great. But there's going to be a year where, UNLV loses to Boise State in the Mountain West Championship game. They're both in the top 20, and we've got an unranked 3rd place Big 12 team in there.
Yeah.
And UNLV's not. Like, that's just
wrong.
not how it's supposed to be. I'm sorry. Like, it's just not.
I
don't care who you play. I don't care who you play. At the end of the day, I don't care. If you win games, that's what. If both teams have 12 wins, then we can talk.
Mm-hmm. Boise belonged against Penn State.
Yes.
They proved that out there.
They didn't win, but they deserve to be there. Like,
yeah, they were better.
Yeah.
We have to preserve the right for the upsets and all things. We almost saw it in ASU, and everyone didn't want ASU in. I think a lot of those people, the SEC would have told you ASU doesn't belong, and we saw what happened. So it's crazy, but that's why we had tried to have these platforms to fight against the powers that be, the SEC and the Big Ten. Cam Stuart, you're the man. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, JT, just thanks for having me. We love just chopping it up, talking shop. Hateful Eight, new Big 12. Although I gotta say, one last thing. As we're recording this, Baylor about to play a 9:00 game. I'm rethinking the Four Corner schools after this. Playing a home game at 9 p.m. Central Time.
If you rethinking it now, just wait till Utah beats you for the 3rd time in football.
Well, yeah, sure. I'll wait on bated breath for that, my man.
Cam Stuart, make sure you guys check out all this stuff that he has at Locked On Baylor. Thank you all for making Locked On Utes your first listen, or Locked On Baylor your first listen of the day. We'll be coming back at you here real soon with the latest in both schools' athletics. We hope you'll join us then.